Welcome to our latest 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, Managing Partner of 76 Capital and host of our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And this show is going to be amazing. The timing is incredible. Our guest is going to be Mike Rabel, the co-founder and CEO of the PLL. And yesterday, they made some really big news. But before we get into Mike and our guest today, as you know, our 76 Capital family and all the things that we do, we're all about working with entrepreneurs who are passionate, who are smart, who are nice, and want to do really big things. And if you're one of those entrepreneurs or you're one of those executives in the sports industry or an athlete who really wants to get involved in the next thing in sports, this is your place. 76 Capital, reach out to us. You can find us at 76 Capital all across the internet on all the different social media networks. As well as reaching out to me directly. I'm at Wayne Kimmel on Twitter and many of the other social media networks as well. Of course, running the controls back at the station is our producer, James Santor. James can be found on Twitter at James Santor, and he continues to do some amazing things in not only for us at 76 Capital, but what he's doing for the community, what he's doing for the LaSalle baseball community, and just try to make it happen and just help people. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we're all about at 76 Capital. And that's why this series is so special to us. We always love to bring on entrepreneurs, executives, and athletes who are thinking about and doing things that are changing the sports industry. And man, things are happening in the sports world every single day. So let's get to it right now. Our guest today is Mike Rabel. He's the co-founder and CEO of the PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League. He's also the co-founder and partner of Rabel Ventures. And you can find Mike on Twitter at Michael Rabel. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Wayne. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited. I mean, we typically start our shows off with wanting to hear your background and where you grew up, and I want to get to that. But I think we should really kick off the show with the exciting news that you and Paul broke yesterday.
Yeah, we're excited. Yesterday we announced, and this is, like you said, very serendipitous timing. We didn't time this up, but it worked out perfectly. That yesterday we announced that we're merging with the MLL, Major League Lacrosse, and so it was an exciting day for the sport. I think aggregation of when this is not any different from the ABA, NBA, AFL, NFL. It's different in size. Let's be realistic. We aspire to be like those leagues, the NFL and NBA, but aggregation and consolidation has to happen often for a sport to make progress. And we felt like this was the natural place. We've told the story before that we had always approached the MLL in the spirit of partnership. That was our number one goal dating back to 2015 when we started this journey. And for a myriad of reasons, it often doesn't work out in your original intention. And I think now, after a couple seasons of having success at the PLL, I think the ownership group at the MLL sort of saw that we were proven operators. We had the credibility. We had the right type of investors, network partner, and NBC. Really great endemic and non-endemic sponsors that had never spent in the sport before, and a fan base that started to become very engaged with the product offering. Our style of working with our athletes is just different than a lot of other approaches in team-based sports. So we thought it made sense to come together and build the future. So it's great timing.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it really is amazing. I remember, talking to Paul, as you said, sort of way back, it was kind of the dream to do this. And I think it's amazing, and it's amazing for the sport. And it is, I think we'll look back, 10, 15, 20 years from now and say, wow, remember that time when the leagues came together and really you had the most talented players on the field all playing together. So that's really exciting. And we'll definitely talk more about the PLL and how you and Paul started that. But let's kind of start off here with what we do here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And typically what we'll do is we'd really love to hear your backstory. I'd love to hear your story, where you grew up and what you were into back when you were, even before you went to high school, like just as a kid. Like what was it like growing up in the Rabel family?
Yeah, I love those stories. Hopefully, there's someone else that finds it interesting besides me and you. But I think the we grew up in a family it was middle class family in Montgomery Village, Maryland. Our father, Alan, who works with us at the PLL now, was a paper salesman. So we learned that you start back at zero every year, and you got to go out and earn a living at the start of the new calendar year. And so we always kind of saw that work ethic from my dad. My mom was an art teacher. And I think that that type of work ethic was instilled in us at a young age. And Paul and I, grew up in Maryland. It gets cold and snowy. I'm lucky to be in California right now. But we started at a young age, selling lemonade, shoveling snow, and we would go to neighborhoods that had big driveways, and we'd go bang on the door and ask them if they could pay us $10 to shovel their driveway. And so it's kind of mentality. We've always had a work ethic mentality and a hard work ethic mentality in our family. But sports was always important. Our father he's from a big basketball family in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So he went to University of North Carolina. So UNC basketball was sort of in our family's tradition, and it was part of what we did as well. We played basketball growing up. We weren't a traditional lacrosse family. We weren't a traditional football family. Eventually fell into those sports, but sports was always central. Being part of a team was central. We grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of other kids. And I had a great childhood. Like I said, coming from a middle-class family, you appreciate things a bit more, and you also strive for, building a life where eventually you can give back. And so that's part of what we're doing here as well.
Absolutely. And then you guys, you went to Dartmouth, I understand, right?
Yep.
And you played football there, is that right?
Yeah, I did. I got lucky for some reason. I think it was my parents really pushing me to make sure that our grades were strong. But we looked at a certain number of Ivy League schools, and they looked at me and let me in because I had good enough grades and was a good enough football player. But going to Dartmouth, I always say, changed my life. Growing up in the neighborhood we did, you don't. Sort of what I aspired to be, sort of what I looked at, sort of one of the more successful people besides my own father in our neighborhood was, CIA agent. And so I thought being in the CIA was something I wanted to do growing up near Washington, D.C. And then you get to Dartmouth and you realize there's all these different avenues that type of degree and network will allow you to have. And so when I was exposed to that, it was eye-opening. It was intimidating. But as I sort of got my feet underneath me, spoke to more people in the Dartmouth network, really understood what it meant to be, to have that type of privilege to go to that school, and then accept that and understand it. And part of the obligation of going to that school is to also give back. And so, sort of through the next, 60% of my career, because I feel like I'm only 30 to 35% there, or maybe 40%. I want to really focus on giving back and making sure that even if you don't go to a school like this, that I was fortunate enough to. I went to high school as a 50% graduation rate. So I was lucky to not only graduate, but also go to Dartmouth. So when you go to a school like that, I think it's important to find ways to give back and make sure that people also have accessibility to, building their careers and driving opportunity.
So, I think that's incredible. And that's something that's such an important thing to share with our audience about, helping others and really hoping to trying to make this world a better place. I mean, so, I think, but just, you played football. Did you play lacrosse in high school? Did you play, or how did, how did that all play out?
Yeah, the lacrosse story is interesting, and Paul's told his story, and that's who you really want to talk about lacrosse with. We played lacrosse because our neighbors had, being in Maryland, obviously it's a hotbed. We didn't play lacrosse. My parents knew nothing about lacrosse. Both are from North Carolina. Our neighbors had extra equipment lying around. There is a barrier to entry when you play lacrosse or hockey. Football, there is too, but most of football equipment is subsidized by local municipalities. So that barrier to entry with lacrosse is real. And so we were lucky enough to have a neighbor who had some extra equipment. They gave us that equipment, and then we had a recreational team that, you pay $50 and you could join the team. And so accessibility equipment, we had that through our neighbors, and then there was a recreational team, Montgomery Village Association, MVSA was around, and we played on that team, which is no longer around. But that was our first entry into it. And then, it's an incredible game. It's fast paced. There's goal scoring. It's teamwork. There's physicality, but it's also an endurance sport. And so you kind of just, once you start playing, you start to fall in love with it. And I think that is one of the things that we really try to focus on, is getting people accessibility to it. And then once you can play, and then you start understanding the tradition as well, it's one of those sports that really engages you. So I played through high school. I ended up having to choose football or lacrosse. It's hard to do both. I played defensive tackle in college. So, going from 300 pounds down to like 220, like in the matter of 90 days isn't really feasible. So I picked the path of football. And that was the first sport. I was probably a little bit better at football, but then my senior year, I got a little bit better at lacrosse in high school. And so I focused on football throughout college. I will say, though, there were practices during spring ball where I'd walk over to the lacrosse field and watch the lacrosse team play, and I would just watch and be like, man, I missed that thing. It's very different than football. But I was fortunate to play a college sport. Those are my best friends that I played with in that locker room. And I see a lot of analogies that I was able to experience being part of a locker room that cross over now into the PLL and other team-based sports. And I think that locker room bond, it's one of the only places where you can experience, besides your family, probably blood, sweat, and tears in one room, and that creates like lifelong bonds. So, that was a great experience for me, and I was lucky to be a part of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're so lucky today to have Mike Rabel, the co-founder and CEO of the PLL, and co-founder and partner of Rabel Ventures, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And, Mike, after you graduated Dartmouth, it didn't just all of a sudden, you and Paul didn't just go out and create the PLL. What happened? What was happening in your life right after you graduated college?
Yeah, my career arc is interesting, and I hopefully I'm still in the beginning part of it. But I think about my first job was in real estate, specifically in their consulting practice at Jones Lang LaSalle. I worked there for about 4.5 years. We had several clients. We would do all of their real estate services, from advisory work to M&A to leasing to consolidation to property management. So I got my experience there. What I was able to achieve through that was a couple things. One, patience. Two, the understanding of a corporate entity and working for a large publicly traded company. Three, corporate hygiene, which is actually fairly important. Just understanding how to interact with other professionals. Sometimes if you skip that step of working at a larger company, often you can feel like a cog in the wheel, but oftentimes it's important to be part of that. And then I think the third thing was general work ethic. I worked for a managing director who was just around the clock. And so, I was his analyst, and I had to be there for him. And, he had several big clients that we worked for. And so that was a very important part for me. Paul, started working in investment banking, real estate, for about 6 months. And then he decided he was going to go full-time lacrosse and be an entrepreneur. He was one of the first to really take that big leap of faith. And so he actually left his job right at the sort of the tail end or the beginning of the financial crisis, 2009. And so I kept working through. And then after about 4.5 years, I decided I would go work with one of my college roommates at Dartmouth and become an entrepreneur. And so we started a portfolio of gyms. He was a partner at a private equity company called Summit Partners. One of their portfolio companies was a gym company called Snap Fitness. It was fairly simple with like really good IRRs back to investors, good cash on cash yield. So, when you're a first time entrepreneur and you're 27 years old, you're not getting bank financing oftentimes for a small business loan. It's your first business. Startup businesses, small businesses don't get good financing. So, we were able to build out a portfolio of gyms with our own capital, raise it from friends and family. Those ended up going pretty well. Then we started another string of our own and operated indoor cycling gyms. So that was based in Boston. And we saw the model we were based in New York at the time. We saw the model of SoulCycle really proliferating. And so we actually had a couple interns, and the interns went down to the Warren Street location and just checked out how many people were going in for individual class, and we were able to build a financial model. we were replicating their model, and credit to those founders who built SoulCycle. But then we didn't want to go head to head with them in New York City, even though there was plenty of space to do so. We went to a new city and launched it in Boston. That was able to scale pretty quickly. Through that process of being a small business owner, we were able to really understand the small business financing markets a bit better, and our inaccessibility to capital, particularly leverage and loans, was pretty evident that there was a gap in the market. This is on the back of the financial crisis and the mortgage crisis in 2009. It really went through all the way to 2011. So in 2012, myself and my partners who were in the gym business, we started. I was in the founding team of starting a small business lending company. This was like early fintech, and so our whole business thesis was like, we were franchise owners, we were asset-backed fitness owners. There were a lot of 150,000 to 300,000 loans that weren't getting made to really solid businesses because the SBA just didn't understand that space. It was too much risk, and then the only other lending option was like high risk loan shark type of lenders. And so we said we could be in the middle, we could be fair, transparent, we could try to build technology around the underwriting process. And so we built a business for about 18 months, got super lucky where a company out of the UK went in and acquired us called Funding Circle. And then I spent, that was October of 2013. Then I spent about 4.5 years building out their revenue practice in the US. So sales, partnerships, strategic partnerships, channel partnerships. That business started to get ready to IPO, ended up IPOing in 2018. And so when it was getting ready to IPO was sort of when I was like, you know what, I've spent a lot of time in the lending space. I want to do something new. I want to go take a lot of risk. I read this book called Pivot that was like a really great opportunity for me to understand myself, create values around what I wanted in my career and my life. And I really wanted to take a really big swing at something before I had a family, before my risk appetite maybe changed. And so Paul and I, throughout that process, had always worked together. He invested in every deal I've done. I've always helped him with his entrepreneurial journey of building camps and clinics. He was one of the first athletes to build like an on-demand clinics and training business that he ended up selling to Tapia. I helped him with that. And then he was leveraging and working, in the professional, as a professional athlete in the MLL. But that business wasn't run, I think, with a management team that was full-time and focused. And because of that, the product and the way they operated was distressed. And so as I was eyeing what to do next in 2016, 2017, as I knew the company was getting ready to go public at Funding Circle, I started talking to Paul more seriously about, hey, why don't we go in and purchase the MLL? And so that's kind of my career. I know that was long-winded, but I wanted to provide all the details there.
No, Mike, it's great. It's great to hear. I mean, look, you and your brother Paul are true entrepreneurs. You guys are complete out there, real trailblazers, and we're doing incredible things prior to all of this. And the idea of then going in to try to go buy the MLL. Did you guys, when you talked about this, I mean, was it like, is this really going to happen? Like, did you really, when you started thinking about are we really going to be able to buy a league and own a league and be able to make this happen? Like, what was, and just as, you guys as brothers, I mean, it must be so incredible to be able to do that together.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, Wayne, people ask us sometimes, would you go do this again? And the answer is no. I would not, just being completely candid, because to that question you're asking, at the time you feel like it's achievable, but then now looking back to where we are, and there's so much more to do. We have not made it at all. But the early success we've had, all the people that have helped us, all the people around the table, you look back and there's no way I could psychologically take that much pain and suffering around building this again, because it's such a large feat to do it, and takes so many different people and so many conversations and the wherewithal to hear so many no's that I don't think I'd put myself through that again. But at the time, I had the appetite to put myself through that. Now I know it's achievable. But it was so difficult. There is so much difficulty ahead of us, but really building it from the ground up, meeting with so many people that say no from all different facets, it can wear on you. And there's times you look yourself in the mirror and I looked at my fiance many times and said, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? And she said, I don't know. Why are you? But now, you look back and I always say it's all about the journey, right? You look back and we did like a quick toast with like the skeleton crew we had in our office in a COVID safe way yesterday as the merger was announced. And, the stories that you tell aren't about the achievements. The stories you tell about all the hard times to get to the achievement. So knowing that that's part of it, I think makes it a bit more palatable. But, working with my brother, I think that's the only way I would have been able to do it. Because it is so hard. It is so emotional. Being able to have someone that I could be vulnerable with, he could be vulnerable with me. We can talk about how we're feeling. I don't feel like he's going to abandon me because I'm having a weak moment. He doesn't feel like, I'm going to abandon him because he's having a weak moment. And he also really rounds out a lot of rough edges I have. And I hope that I do the same with him. And so we really are a good counterbalance. And I think it's what you look for in founders.
Absolutely. And we're so excited to have Mike Rabel on our 76 Capital Leadership Series today, the co-founder and CEO of the PLL. And Mike, you just touched on something really interesting. I mean, look, the journey of being an entrepreneur, it's not, a straight line to the top, ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ and like, oh, we did it, right? I mean, and it was such a perfect, this amazing ride. But was there one moment or a certain moment when you're going and you're gonna create this new league, and as you said, I mean, people are saying no, they're saying I'm sure people were telling you you're crazy, this will never work. I mean, all the normal stuff that naysayers, and a lot of people just aren't as risky as like the two of us and your brother, right? That really just kind of put ourselves out there, right, and to do these things. But was there a moment or that just you were like, wow, I think this may work, and it just kind of clicked?
Yeah, there's a couple moments. The first one was when the Rain Group told us that they were going to invest in us. I can't say enough about the professionalism, the risk appetite, the malleability and flexibility of that company. They're a merchant bank that does venture private equity and has a hedge fund business focused on TMT. And it was always a dream. We were like, yeah, we'd love to get the Rain Group in here. And we went back and forth with them for a couple months, and a couple of their partners, really took interest in us when we went to investment committee and they turned us down. And, Colin Neville in particular and Rob Petroforte were like, okay, well, if you guys turn it down, and I don't think we've told this story before, they might be a little bit mad, but okay, well, if Rain's going to turn it down, then we're going to invest personally. And then they were like, what? Okay, well, maybe we should take another look at it. Why do you want to invest? So once that happened, we were able to have a deeper conversation with them, really like get in the weeds, peel back the onion, however you want to call it, and got to a place where they were going to come in to be our lead seed investor. And that moment for me, knowing that we had such a great strategic investor that was going to provide us a lot of credibility. We had a couple other term sheets, but it was more from, just other investors. It would be more, just here's the money. And we knew that we needed like a investor that wanted to get their hands dirty a bit and that also had expertise in the space. And so once we had it, then that was kind of that moment where I felt like I had a bit more of a head of steam. And then the second moment was, I think it was at Homewood Field. It was in Baltimore. It was a Saturday night game. It was Atlas versus the Whip Snakes. When you build a league in the first year or two, there's a lot of decisions you have to make that are right and wrong. And I've made plenty of bad decisions and I own those. One of the decisions we made was outsourcing ticket sales. Instead of building internally, I was like, I don't know enough about ticket sales, that we just got to outsource this to an agency. And there's some good agencies that do it well. But first couple of weekends we struggled, putting butts in seats. And so, we got halfway through the season and we're at Homewood Field, which is, the Yankee Stadium for lacrosse. And we had, 12,000 people there, sold it out. There was we had to turn people away. It was a night game. It was like a big rivalry because there's a lot of Maryland guys, a lot of Hopkins guys playing against each other. And I remember just looking around and it was like buzzing. and it was like a beautiful Saturday night. And I was like, man, just all these people came here to see this. Okay, well, I think we're on to something now. We can keep doing this. And then we did it again in Albany, sold out up there. So I think those moments is when you get that affirmation and that pop, and then it makes you even work harder, right? You're like, okay, well, these people spent their money to come watch this game. We really have to make this work for them in the future.
That's those are incredible moments. I mean, those are the kind of things that you'll never ever forget. Sort of when you stand back and you look and you say, wow, look what we just built. I mean, that's really, really special. And
Right.
One of the other things I was really wondering about. I mean, how did you created this league, right? And then you had to create the teams. So how did that work? What was that process? Did you and Paul and your team just start making up? I mean, the names are great. I mean, the Archers, the Whip Snakes, Chaos, Water Dogs, Atlas. I mean, where did all these come from, and the logos themselves? I mean, it seemed like it must have been a really cool process.
Yeah, and I take zero credit for that. A lot of it comes down to Paul, his vision and his team's vision. We had a couple other folks that really worked with us on that internally, Tyler Steinhardt and RJ Kaminsky, and our designer Katie Scott, and we also had an agency that worked with us, and they're fantastic. We Are Bill is the name of them, and so we really gave them our vision around the typography we wanted to try to tie to, so the regional undertones, really being cutting edge, futuristic. And so we started with each team as like a brand in itself. What do we want this type of team to portray, right? And then you have a bunch of different names, and you start building the values under that team. And it has nothing to do with the people at all, the players. It's just the team and what it represents. And so we went super deep on that. We were able to come up with like really great 6-team names, went back and forth a ton, took a lot of work. And then as far as team construction, that the idea behind that, the only sort of role I played there was being able, because the college lacrosse, it's interesting, right? One of our theses is college lacrosse has done so well for so many decades, and there's so much fandom tied to these college programs that doesn't carry over in the pro sport for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons that's why we started the PLL. But we wanted to tie some of that early fandom, because we knew our teams weren't going to tie to any cities, to some colleges. And so we created some core teams around, colleges and guys that played at certain universities. So if you look at the Whip Snakes, who have won the last 2 championships, they're mostly 80% of those guys all play together at Maryland, and that's worked to their favor. Right. But then like a lot of Maryland people start aggregating around that team and feeling that sense of fanhood. Same thing with Chrome as far as Duke, Notre Dame with the Redwoods. Right. So people that go to those schools start to find their linkage there. And then eventually, if we evaluate going to a city-based model, you can also tie back, if the Whip Snakes want to be a regional Mid-Atlantic team, that could probably make sense, because they've already had like a deep-rooted fan base there. And then we also took into other considerations, obviously, like player ability and where they played previously, maybe in the MLL together. I stayed out of that. That was mostly, Tom Schreiber and Kyle Harrison, who work on our player relations team, to construct those teams, to try to really give them an even balance. And I think that in our first year, it worked really well. We had 40% of our games go to overtime, so there's a ton of parity.
Yeah, it's very well done. I mean, I got to give you a lot of credit, and I'll tell you, the other thing which just really stands out, and I think one of the amazing things is not only the fact that you and Paul are you're so knowledgeable and so well spoken when it comes to the running of a league. I always say that, I tell people, like, no matter what if you want a commissioner, you and Paul could be the commissioner of any league out there, because of the way that you guys look at the way the operations of the league runs, as well as really taking into account kind of the what's next that's happening out there. And that's something that certainly from a venture capital perspective and things that we do at 76 Capital, we appreciate so much, because you're looking at what's happening from a social perspective and how you're the brand. And then, look, the sponsors that you have, and you have your Bose headphones on, your Capital One, Progressive, Wolf Athletics. I mean, how did you get all those sponsors to lean in, and not only just lean in, but actually be true, partners of yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is good fortune and their own risk appetite, just like a venture capitalist. So on the sponsorship side, well, I'd say I appreciate you even saying that Paul and I could do something like that. We have a ton of respect for other league commissioners, and we specifically don't have a commissioner title because we think of ourselves as building a company. Our players have stock options, and we work with them. They're our colleagues, and so. But at the same time, I appreciate that type of compliment, and we were always trying to strive for what's next and pushing the envelope. And the single entity nature allows us to do that at a faster clip. So I wouldn't want to take away from other leagues and their ability to be agile. It's just more difficult when you have 30 owners because they all have their own agendas. And that's just natural when it's a trade association. And I think that we have investors who believe in us, who are flexible, understand that it's a company that we're leading. Lacrosse happens to be the end product, but there's so many other initiatives wrapped in that. And if we can be on the cutting edge and really view ourselves as a petri dish to work with all these other partners, that allows us to be faster, more nimble and flexible to get things done and be the first oftentimes, which is very helpful. But on the sponsorship question, look, a CMO of a brand is basically doing the same evaluation that you do, Wayne, when you're investing in a company, right? They have a certain amount of capital they can invest. They want to see a return on it. They want to understand, what the goals of their capital are going to be, how they're going to drive return, what's going to be, more impressions based, what's going to be engagement based, where's the buyback, if there's a buyback tied to this, where's the ROI, and so what we really try to do when we talk to a brand is not speak at them, and this is like sales 101, but really try to listen what their brand goals are. And before we go to a pitch, we're in there. If they're a publicly traded company, we're in there. We look through the transcript of their last earnings report and try to look at what their new initiatives are, so become educated, but then also listen well. And at this point, a lot of it is they know about us at this point, so a lot of it is sort of coming back to them with creative. And what really, end of the day, wins sponsorships, and what we really try to talk about are two things. One, our flexibility as a single entity, and not having to go through, all these different layers, whether it's different owners or different cities or different unions. We have rights to all the marks and the teams and the logos, and we own we own the ability to integrate the broadcast and on social. So when you talk to us, there's all these different assets, but we're the only person you need to talk to because we'll get it done quickly. And so that speed and flexibility and total ownership all the way through will allow a brand to come on faster because they're like, oh, this makes more sense. Like, this is easier. This isn't hard. Yeah, the dollars aren't the same as the NBA, right, for us right now at all. But we can compete and shave off some marketing dollars because it's super easy for them. And then they see our audience, which is obviously attractive. So that's a big piece of what we do. And then the second piece is creative. And so you really have to come back to these marketers with awesome ideas that they can't get anywhere else. And I think that that's what our team does so well. We have really creative people, and we have a value at the PLL to encourage creativity. And so it's like in our DNA. And so when we come back to a brand after we understand what their initiatives are, they get all these things with the PLL, but then we have these really cool, innovative brand partnership ideas. And that's what gets them more excited. And that's what's going to get them to say, okay, not only have you talked metrics with me, but this is like something I can't get anywhere else, or this is like an incredible idea. I can't say no to this. And so that's something that is just sort of proprietary to us. It's hard to replicate. It's just kind of like Pixar. Like if you look at the Pixar story, I'm not comparing to Pixar at all, but I draw inspiration from them. And they say, how were they able to just stamp out movie after movie after movie, your box office hit? It was because who their creative directors were. It's because of who their producers were, the writers were, right? They just really would give ownership, opportunity, and let them sort of push forward and create their own movie. And we do that here. It's like, there's no way that Paul and I should be taking the lion's share of credit. Our team gets a ton of autonomy. They're operators themselves. We have another value here. It's operate like an owner. And so allowing them to know that creativity is like so important, and they are operating as an owner representing the PLL when they're talking to brands or delivering a product into the day, that gives them a lot of ownership and pride in what they're doing, and it pulls through in the end product back to the brand.
That's awesome. I mean, it's all about team. It's all about having really good people around you, and it also sounds like you guys are certainly having a lot of fun as you're building this. Look, I mean, it was amazing. You had you signed your big NBC deal, which was really shocked a lot of people in the sports world. Like that was incredible. You had your first season, it was successful, and then the pandemic hit. And what was that? What was that like? I mean, you all teams sitting around like, okay, we're in the middle of this pandemic. What are we going to do? And then you pulled off a really, really successful bubble season. How did that all go down?
Oh man, it was kind of like probably everybody else. There's those moments when it first happens, you're like, is this actually happening? We had so many plans for 2020. It doesn't matter what they were. It doesn't matter the momentum we felt. We were just hit with the reality of being in a pandemic. And obviously, none of us at the PLL, nor even our board members or investors, had been through this before. There was a moment of sort of reflection, like, well, wow, I can't believe we're doing this, and we're in the middle of this, and this is going to change things completely. And then you're left with no other choice. You're left with two choices: one, just to sort of close up shop and say this is too hard, or push against and say, okay, we're going to try to figure this out. So naturally, we just decided we're going to figure it out. And there's not just this isn't like a chest beating or pat ourselves on the back. It took our entire team of leaders. It took specifically, our COO, Andrew Sinnenberg. He is just he's a complete operator. Our GC, Rob Sanzillo, our head physician, Dr. Catherine Logan, and then our board. So the buy-in from our management team and our board to allow us to go construct something and allow us to be creative, because we were the first team-based sport to announce our playback. And so when we did that in our bubble format and bringing everyone to one location for a month, we're not as well capitalized as the NBA, but to be able to pull this off, because you can throw money in anything and make anything really safe, right? We couldn't rent out Disneyland like they did. So we were able to construct something, or Disney World rather. We were able to construct something in Utah that really made a lot of sense, but we had to get creative and crafty. And there were definitely moments where our medical committee was meeting, and we had a 172-page document with all the different protocol that we needed to follow. They developed independent of me and Paul being on it. And we brought in and paid outside physicians to join us, infectious disease doctors. And we were independent of it because we knew that we would probably push the envelope a bit too much on the commercial side and maybe loosen some of the restrictions on site. So we wanted to build the strictest, most safe protocol that we could possibly come up with. And then we had to operate within that. So that committee was just off the races for about 6 weeks. And then we put it together, put it in a presentation to the board and said, this is what we're going to do. Here's what the cost is going to be. Here's what the upside is going to be. Red light or green light. We think it's a green light. And they all green lit it. But it was risk on them as well, right? Because a lot of brand damage can happen if you don't pull it off well. We even went as far as, and this is all of the medical committee and our doctors, we were doing cardiology tests on site for any guys that had tested positive to COVID previously, but didn't have COVID when they arrived. So, one of those players, and he's very public about it, is Jules Hendenberg. He got there and he tested positive back in like May. And it was just like a normal, like sort of flu symptoms. But when he got there, we did a cardiology test on him and a couple other players, and his O2 levels were incredibly low, which compromised him for cardiac arrest if he were to play. And then what we just saw last weekend with the Florida basketball player dropping because of the same thing, right? There's real implications of this that can happen to athletes. And so, this is, again, it's not a chest beating exercise, but it was more of like there's so many things we don't know about this virus right now that we had to be very, very thoughtful and probably overly cautious, because we need to look out for our athletes who are putting themselves out there and make sure that they're safe in doing this, right? So that's what I'm most proud about, is the fact that we're able to create this bubble, no on-site cases, and then success from a viewership perspective, from an OTT perspective, from an ad sales revenue perspective or sponsorship perspective. We were just fortunate to pull it off, and we're cautiously optimistic about 2021.
Yeah, I mean, it was must have been, must have been nerve-wracking. I mean, for you and for your team, did were you guys all on site, or were you at the office, or how did it all? Did you just move everything there? How did that work?
Yeah, we had a team, a travel team, and then we had a team. We always have an on-site and off-site team, and it's important for us because we all wear different hats, right? So when we're in the off season, and then we go into the season, you wear a different hat, right? You're traveling, you're operating on site, and then when you're in the off season, you're more doing sort of the work to prepare, right? You're laying the foundation. But so we had an on-site team that was going to go in the bubble. They had a quarantine for 2 weeks. They had a test before they arrived. They had a test on site. They had to do another test. Before we entered in the open space. So we knew who was going to be on site team. We knew who the offsite team is just as important. All of our sports betting initiatives are run offsite because we knew that had to be fluid, and it was our first time doing it. We needed like really focused, good concentration from our team. We had about 300 people on site, including players, NBC talent, our production team, all of our PLL staff. We were all on site together. We were in there with the players. We were in the same dining lines with them. On the field. And I think the thing that was great is being able to spend that much time with everyone. The bonds that we created there, I think, will be life lasting. But one of the most wild things was after the championship game, which in our first year, the championship game in Philadelphia really popped off when the Whipsnakes won in overtime, and being in front of I think we had like 14,000 people there, but being able to like experience that, and the Whipsnakes experienced that game, and then this championship game was also exciting, and then you turn it off and there's no one there, and so it was almost anticlimactic. It was like all the players were celebrating, obviously, and they should, so the team was celebrating, and then but there's no one in the stands, so you turn it off and you're like, did we just have our championship game on NBC? What? So I'm looking forward to getting back with fans in a safe way. I think it's just such an important part, and the players feel it too, man. They love having fans there, and it's just it's a integral part of the sports fan, or just the sports ecosystem.
Well, it's really great having Mike Rabel on our show, and as we sort of start to wind down our show here, Mike, these are such great stories. I think there's so many things that we can continue to talk about. I want to touch on two quick things before we wrap up. Number one, you just mentioned sports betting and kind of how and the league are leaning in on sports betting, and what kind of made you make that decision, and how are you going about it? How have you gone about it, and how do you plan on going about it in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it was an easy decision for us because our number one goal is to bring on net new sports fans to lacrosse, and so how you do that is through viewership, exposure, and engagement. And we knew that we could not only better engage our current fan base with sports betting, but also engage new fans through sports betting. And so it's always been an initiative for us. And we were able to create a year one partnership with DraftKings. It was fantastic. And now we're sort of evaluating the longer term landscape, and then also bring on Sports Genius as our integrity partner. But there's multiple layers to it. And so our head of strategy, Christian Henze, really took that, and he likes to he understands the sports betting space well, and in his previous life he had understood the space, and him with a deep understanding and education of it was able to allow us to move more quickly, and then Rain has their arms around it as well. And so we looked at it as, this is table stakes for us. Let's move on this as fast as possible. We're able to launch with those two partners, and how we look at it in the future is really about building out better, more robust, advanced stats and data. Really is our data analytics business. And so, we've invested in bringing on a new head of analytics, and really driving into what kind of data can we make available. So when lines are set by operators, those lines are going to be really accurate, dynamic, ever changing. And so live markets are going on during our games, and we had that this year, which was exciting. And then also allow, what different style of sports bettors to get access to that information so they can make well-educated assumptions on our games. And it's fun. I mean, the game of lacrosse, there's so many different layers to it that it's really a sports bettor's dream. right? It's not just really straightforward where it's like under over lines. There's really interesting stats that happen at the face-off, or save percentages, or goals, or different lines that are happening and changes. And so because there's so much action that happens with so many goals, there's so many different bets and prop bets that can be created on a real-time basis. So we're really investing in our advanced data. So we're going to be bringing on some really cool ideas in the future. And then the last thing I'd say is I think retail is a big component of what we're doing as well. So creating an on-site experience, not just watching through broadcast or radio or whatever it is, or digitally. We think on-site's a big part of sports betting as well, and we've seen some other leagues and teams do that. So this is an area we're going to be really focused on with our eventual new sports betting partner.
Well, we'll be watching. We're excited about that side of things. I mean, excited about the whole thing. And just to, I think we touched on it at the very beginning, and I'd love to just kind of wrap up with this. Again, you and Paul were able to pull off this incredible merger. And, hopefully it's the real future for the sport in general. What are some of the things, just from your perspective, what are your hopes and dreams as to now having the two leagues together, and what will the future look like? Or what do you hope to be?
Yeah, well, as part of the merger, we announced an expansion. So we have an 8th team, right? So we have 8 teams now. And we want to be really intentional about expansion. I think it's a way to provide more fandom, more players to play, but at the same time, you need to be really intentional when you do so. It takes resources, right? Capital, but then also you don't be too dilutive to your product. We have a ton of parity. Pro sports is for the best players in the world, right? Just because you play college sports doesn't mean you get to play pro. How many players on an Alabama senior class actually play in the NFL? It's a small percentage, and so that's because it's so competitive. And so that's important for us to make sure we're keeping that competitive nature, and the product is great. And so we can sit here and beat our chests about expansion, but at the end of the day, we want to always be really thoughtful about our on-field product and making sure the best players in the world are getting accessibility. So we think that captures it. And the second thing, obviously, is growth. We think that, aggregation, consolidation is going to allow us to grow faster, not having mixed messages in the market, being able to have one unified voice in the pro sport. I think that it's going to be really exhilarating, and it's going to allow us to commercialize at a faster clip, which is going to be better for the league, the teams, the players. They're going to be able to make more money as we commercialize at a faster pace. And the last piece is, all of a sudden, the MLL was around for 20 years. We do at the PLL, we've been around for 2. We do a really good job of storytelling. But one of the things we're missing was this rich 20-year history of professional lacrosse. And now that we have access to all that content and all those legends who played, who paved the path for us and the foundation, we plan to pay a lot of respect to what those people did, and tell those stories. And, I think it was really interesting to see yesterday on Instagram, the players, there's almost like this exhale where a lot of our players, even though they're in the PLL, they spent 3, 4, 5, 10 years in the MLL, and they built these bonds in these locker rooms, and they won accomplishments, they won championships. And so for them to be able to talk about it openly, for them to be able to say, hey, this is great for the sport, I could talk about my entire career, not just my last 2 years, I think is really valuable. And so we've cut up our Q1 content calendar. We have a whole new content calendar we're developing, and we're really excited to really storytell the tradition of professional lacrosse in one place.
Yeah, that's so exciting, and I can't wait to see it all. And hopefully, we're able to come out and go to some games this year, and fill the stands as safe as possible. But that would just be incredible. Again, Paul, this has been, it's been amazing to have Mike, amazing to have you.
You can call me Paul all you want, man. I take that as a compliment. He's far better looking than me. So keep calling me Paul.
You guys sound so much alike. It's amazing.
I know we do. I know. It's the only thing.
But I'll tell you, look, it is a huge accomplishment that what you guys have been able to do so far. There's so much more down the road. Really excited to watch, be a fan, and in any way help you guys in the future. So this has been great. Loved hearing your story. Thank you so much. Again, we've had the opportunity to spend time with Mike Rabel, the co-founder and CEO of the PLL. I mean, this is right the day after did this really, really big merger. So again, congratulations, and thank you so much for joining our 76 Capital Leadership Series.
Appreciate it, Wayne. Thanks for having me, man.
It's been great. And everybody, if you want to catch this episode and all the other episodes that we do on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, go to YouTube, go to your favorite podcast out there, and follow us at 76 Capital. You'll get this amazing story as well as the others that we've done for different athletes, entrepreneurs, and executives out there in the sports industry. Hope everyone has a great day.